What's up everyone? Welcome back to the channel for a video that I've been waiting to make for a long time, but of course I wanted to see as many 2024 releases as I could before putting this out there. That way I have the best possible compilation of my 15 favorite films of the entire calendar year. And please keep that in mind, this is my personal list, not an objective list of the 15 best films of the year. It's my personal picks for my favorites, and I would absolutely encourage you guys to share yours down in the comments. It's okay to disagree, just make sure you do so respectfully. And just as a quick warning, this video might contain some mild spoilers for the films that I'm listing, although to be fair, these are films that I think are worth your time, and if you haven't seen them, I would recommend that you do. So I don't want to give too much away because I want you to be able to experience it for the first time yourself. Just a few more quick notes before we start. I have seen, as of right now, 91 theatrical releases. Well, some of them are streaming, but mostly theatrical releases that have come out in 2024. I think it's worth noting that a few of the films on this list actually rose in terms of their scores. I gave them originally something lower and then bumped them up a half a star after rewatching them. So you might notice that. You might go back and watch a couple of my reviews and be like, wait a minute, but he gave this movie a higher score than that one, and that one's higher up on the list. Another thing I want to point out is that some films that technically got a wide release this year were actually 2023 films. A good example is Strange Darling. I loved that movie. Please check it out if you haven't seen it. But unfortunately, it is disqualified from the list because technically it got a limited release last year. And I hate that I'm sticking to that principle, but I'm gonna do it because it makes more sense to me. But as a side note, I really hate that all of these big films, especially the ones that are talked about in awards season, get such a limited release at the very end of the year and don't get a wide release, at least in the United States, until the following year. So there's a couple of films that I think might have made this list if I got a chance to see them, such as The Brutalist and Nickel Boys, but unfortunately both of those are disqualified as well because I haven't had the opportunity to see them yet. Alright, let's get some honorable mentions out of the way, and I think I have like 6 or 7 of them. I couldn't narrow it down, man, it's tough to do, so just a few shout outs real quick. September 5, Challengers, A Real Pain, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, Deadpool and Wolverine, Conclave, and My Old Ass. All right, on to the core list. I hear a lot of people were disappointed by this one. Now look, I get it. The internet told you that Longlegs is the scariest film to come out in the last 50 years, and you understandably went into the film with those expectations, only to discover that it is, in fact, not the scariest movie ever made. But you know what? I approached this film with modest expectations and thought it was properly creepy. Finally, we have an Oz Perkins movie that works for me for the most part. This is just right up my alley, a film that feels very inspired by the likes of Seven or Silence of the Lambs, in that we see a lot of cryptic messages, a serial killer silently stalking families in an exceptionally creepy way. Micah Monroe breathes so heavily in this movie that I swear you can feel her terror, and a lot of it does come down to the performance by Nick Cage as Longlegs. And man, it just worked for me. If it doesn't work for you, the whole movie's gonna fall flat because you're just gonna be seeing Nicolas Cage overplaying his usual goofy persona. It was incredibly creepy for me. I do think the film has too much exposition and supernatural trickery in the third act, but it didn't compromise the film for me. I still think this is great.
Well, you're American, okay? Okay. What kind of American are you?
Here we have another film that wound up being very different than what I think most people were expecting from it. Alex Garland's Civil War is not a politically charged commentary on the current qualms of our bipartisan system here in the United States. Instead, it's about war photographers, how they do what they do, what they aim to accomplish with their work, how the messages they hope to spread can sometimes fail, and the lengths that they need to go to emotionally in order to remain level-headed and ultimately survive in this line of work. I think this film has top-notch tension, great performances. It presents America as a terrifying, war-torn landscape that, even though it shies away from making any direct political statements, almost feels like a warning, a glimpse at what a modern civil war might look like. Flaws and all, this one left me with a lot to think about, and I'm still thinking about it 8 or 9 months later.
How do you control people who no longer believe? You create something to fear.
This one really surprised me. I did not think I would wind up seeing this film on my list at the end of the year. It exists in this subgenre of horror that I like to call nun horror, and I think it is the most bereft of originality when it comes to subgenres within horror. But the first Omen has a burning passion at the center of it. This is just an all-around stunning debut from Arkasha Stevenson. that has killer visuals, a captivating mystery, gruesome imagery that honestly pushes boundaries at times. Dare I say I prefer this slightly to the original from Richard Donner. Die Hard fans will definitely consider that to be sacrilege, but I think this one is both scarier and more interesting. Nell Tiger-Free definitely feels like she's pulling an Isabelle Adjani here from Possession, and she does a great job of putting the viewer in the shoes of a character who, I mean, come on, we all knew that she was going to wind up being Damien's mother. That twist is not going to surprise anybody. And yet somehow it all worked for me. Ladies and gentlemen, we have ourselves the rare horror prequel win.
What the fuck is that thing? We kidnapped a fucking vampire. A ballerina vampire.
Geez, there's not many people talking about this one. I don't know, what happened to enjoying movies that are just purely fun? Of course this isn't high art. And I don't even know what it is really, but radio silence and their approach to horror comedies, it just works for me. And Abigail is unadulterated vampire fun by the bloody bucketful, and it doesn't take itself seriously at all. Alicia Weir is ridiculously good at flipping the switch between innocent 12-year-old girl and centuries-old maniacal vampire on a dime. And the entire ensemble cast is great. I thought Dan Stevens was delightfully funny in this movie. It certainly does have a few missteps here and there, and it does inevitably overcomplicate the story in the third act. But this is the kind of bloody fun that I wish we would get more of. I want more big budget horror comedies.
This thing is a parasite. You witnessed a death. Now it's latched onto you.
This is one of those films that I was a bit more lukewarm on the first time I saw it, but I have now watched Smile 2 3 times, and you know what, guys? I was wrong. This is easily better than the first one, and even though it's largely more of the same stuff, I think it's executed on a level that clears just about every technical element from the first film. It's difficult to develop a pop star character who not only feels like they could actually exist, but also one that I feel genuinely invested in. But Parker Finn and Naomi Scott teamed up to do just that, and I think they did an exceptional job. The scares, as simple as they may be, are highly effective. I jumped out of my seat multiple times during the screening that I saw in theaters. Some of the camera shots in this movie are insane, let alone the opening 5 minutes, which were filmed to appear as though there are no cuts. I'm not sure if there are some stuck in there that are hidden. Pair that with an excellent original score that incorporates these distorted pop lyrics that properly unnerved me, and you have a proper horror sequel that is so much better than I expected. It has thematic merits too. I mean, it explores the effects of fame on mental health, it explores substance abuse. There's a lot of subtext to this film, and I appreciate that it's able to be this mainstream jump scare filled nightmare fuel and also explore some character driven stuff.
Goslings in print on the first thing they see. Which would be you? You're his mother now.
Disney needs to take notes because DreamWorks could teach them a whole lecture on how to make a gorgeous, heartfelt animated story with this movie. The Wild Robot has breathtaking animation, deep themes about parenthood, and it's not afraid to delve into heavy subjects like death, grief, feelings of isolation. Roz is a very multifaceted character in that she's not only discovering life outside of her programming and trying to figure out what she is, but also learning how to care for an orphan goose. So there's an element of parenthood to this film that I think parents around the world can connect with. And I always say this, but the best films for children are actually films for families. Adults and children can get equal amounts of things out of it.
This drug seems to have the potential to actually heal you. The implications are life-changing.
Here we have a pleasant, uplifting reflection on self-esteem, confidence, and feeling comfortable in your own skin. And I'm of course joking about it being pleasant. The message of A Different Man is clear. Sebastian Stan's character heals from his birth defect, hoping to begin his life anew, only to discover that he's every bit as unhappy and unsure of himself as before. It's a devastating psychological deterioration that we follow as the audience. Especially with the introduction of Adam Pearson's character, Stan does such a great job of conveying the intense amount of envy that his character feels for the other man. This man who, despite suffering from the same condition that he did, is a social butterfly. I can't say that I love the ending, but this is one of those times where you just find yourself fully entranced by the characters and you really have no idea where the story's gonna go next.
Have you ever dreamt of a better version of yourself? Younger, more beautiful, more perfect.
I swear I didn't do this on purpose. I know we have 2 movies back to back that basically have the exact same themes. Well, maybe not the exact same, but very similar. This time we see Demi Moore as a middle-aged character who longs to look young and desirable again, and she's willing to try a highly experimental drug in order to do it. The substance feels very Cronenberg-inspired. We get tons of insane body horror, all of which leads to a batshit insane finale that needs to be seen to be believed. This is another gorgeously shot film. It adopts this bright, shiny, almost sterile aesthetic, which was most definitely a conscious choice. Much like A Different Man, I think its intentions are very obvious. Subtlety is not one of its strong suits. Clearly, this is meant to be an examination of modern beauty standards and the societal pressures that exist within certain industries. And I can see that lack of subtlety wearing on people, especially considering the film is over 2 hours long, but everything is glued together by Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley. Two excellent performances, but I think Moore is obviously the one who's deserving of the headlines. It's totally unique and absolutely disgusting. This is one of the few movies that I would say, hold the popcorn, hold the snacks, those can wait.
Just open the door. I am telling you that there is someone in there with you.
Next up, we have perhaps the least talked about film on the list. There are very few horror films from the last decade or so that I can say genuinely scared me, like freaked me out to my core. Oddity scared me. And this is a smaller, low-budget film that combines home invasion and supernatural thrills together to make this amalgamation that is extremely potent. It's very clever in the use of a couple of different gimmicks, one of which involves a camera that's set up to take bursts, and the characters are looking at the photos and see things that you definitely don't want to see when it's a camera that's been set up in your house for a couple days. It does get a little hokey in the third act and perhaps unveils a little too much information to the audience through exposition that I think was avoidable, but it's remarkably effective for what it is, and I think more people should be talking about this one.
I'm Anxiety. I am just such a huge fan of yours. Riley's New Emotions. Wow!
Remember when we all finally came up to headquarters?
Nostalgia.
That was like 30 seconds ago, nostalgia.
I feel like it's safe to say that we need to get one of these every couple years just to chronicle the life of Riley as she goes through life's many hurdles. Inside Out 2 is a sequel that I was looking forward to, but with quite a bit of caution because Pixar tends to not fare too well when it comes to sequels. But this exceeded my expectations, and while it may not be as excellent as the first film, no matter who you are, no matter what stage of life you're in, I have no doubt that you have at some point in your life experienced anxiety. And it may just seem like a natural next step in the story to introduce anxiety as a character living in Riley's head. I can't overstate how brilliant it is in execution and the way it's used. And it's probably controversial to put this ahead of The Wild Robot, but I do think this is the best animated film of the year, so if you slept on it, go check it out. Here we have perhaps the best looking film of the year, maybe with the exception of the AI deepfake Ian Holm, which I still despise. They could have just gone with a full practical animatronic and it would have looked far better. But this project has an incredible production design for a budget of $80 million. I mean, you see films come out that have twice or triple the budget and don't look nearly as great. And to me, Alien Romulus was a proper return to the horror genre for the Alien franchise. It definitely has a few too many recycled lines. I have no idea what they were thinking with the "get away from her, you bitch" one. That was atrocious. But when I set aside my nitpicks, this is just exactly what I wanted it to be. Great world building. I loved the sibling dynamic, which was refreshing. And this universe continues to tackle artificial intelligence through these synthetic characters, and David Johnson as Andy is just fantastic. We also see a return to the practical sets and monsters of the older films, and personally, that's what I want from these. I just want horror, proper body horror, scary, cool sci-fi shit with analog-style technology. I guess it all comes down to what you personally want from this franchise. Does Romulus sometimes feel like an Alien Greatest Hits cover? Yeah, but that's what I like about it.
I am telling you, you do not know this guy.
Let's be real, Anora had to make the list. This film, I think, has the single best performance of the year. Even though I felt like Annie was a slightly underdeveloped protagonist, I still have no doubt in my mind that Mikey Madison knows everything there is to know about this character and who she is deep down. And strangely, even if I wish we would have gotten a bit more setup before the events of the film, I still felt for this character and found myself wanting the best for her. Somehow it's taken me until now to realize that most of Sean Baker's films feature sex workers, and he just seems to have this way of writing them into these vulnerable, sympathetic people that make for great characters in a film like this. And Anora really is a Cinderella story gone awry. It is not exactly what I was expecting it to be because I didn't read up too much on it before watching it. In ways, it's a bleaker film than I was expecting, but it's also quite funny. There's a combination of humor and tragedy here. And it's funny in an unironic way, you know, situational humor that feels like it could happen and play out in real life, and it's authentic. The tone at play here requires a serious balancing act, and Sean Baker knows exactly how to get it just right.
My dreams grow darker. Does evil come from within us? Or from beyond?
In large, this was precisely what I was expecting a Robert Eggers take on Dracula to look like. It's bleak, moody, often desaturated, and the film crafts an atmosphere that effortlessly transports the viewer back to the 1830s. You could seriously hit pause at just about any moment in this movie and probably land on a frame that's worthy of being wall-mounted. I said this in my review, and I still stand by it. Of the three versions of Nosferatu, I think this is definitely the most pedestrian in approach. It does lack the sympathetic edge of Werner Herzog's take, as well as the infectious silence of the original silent film. Instead, Eggers plays things pretty straight and crafts a purely demonic Count Orlok. This dude is inhuman. He is the devil in the flesh. But I kind of feel like the sense of impending doom when he's not around is almost more powerful than the scenes in which he does appear. And then there's also Lily Rose Depp, who acts circles around the rest of an already solid cast. A lot of this story is very familiar, but it's executed with such an elegance that I was just transfixed by. Killer ending too. All around, this is just a winner. So yeah, probably the best horror film of the year.
My childhood. My mother. I want them back. I want them back.
I'll never forgive y'all for letting this one flop. Did Furiosa need to exist? No, but neither did Fury Road, and that was incredible. Speaking of Fury Road, Furiosa is a very different film. It's not set over the course of a single day. There's a lot more methodical pacing to it. And you know, I've seen a lot of comments about the fact that Anya Taylor-Joy doesn't have many lines in the film, but when she says, "I want them back," I felt that shit. This is a proper revenge story. And for all of the modern complaints about Hollywood mismanaging quote-unquote strong female characters, this is one done right. I mean, Furiosa loses everything to Dementis, is sold to Immortan Joe as a slave essentially, escapes, disguises herself right under his nose, and slowly builds her way up the ranks as she plots her revenge. It's dirty, it's brutal in the best ways, and George Miller is damn near 80 years old, and yet he's making these kick-ass films. It does have more digital effects than Fury Road did, but I still think they look epic for the most part. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Chris Hemsworth's epic turn as Dementis. Great villain.
Your father didn't believe in revenge.
We believe in Fremen.
Let me fight beside you.
2024 belongs to the deserts, baby. Now, I don't think it's even slightly controversial to put Dune Part 2 at the top of my list. In fact, a majority of the lists that I have seen at least have this in the top 3. And while I certainly enjoyed Dune Part 1, it did have its flaws. Movies that are a Part 1, I think, are always difficult to pull off because they're, well, mostly setup. They're half of a story. Dune Part 2 is extraordinary. I mean, seeing this in IMAX alone was a game changer. The world building, the visuals on display here, it's some of the best that we've gotten in science fiction, maybe since Star Wars graced the big screen in the 70s. Full disclosure, I have not read the Dune books, so it was interesting to watch because there were ways in which the story subverted my expectations. I thought I was going to be watching the story of a hero rising from the shackles of imperial oppression to liberate the people of Arrakis and set things right. And I love how the reality is much more of a gray area. Don't get me wrong, there are some evil villains in this film. Austin Butler as Fade Routha is everything that I wanted, but Paul Atreides is a prophet. He's becoming the puppet of a fanatical cult, and this world is much more intricate than I ever would have predicted, and I can't wait for Dune Messiah. So there it is, my list of the 15 best films that I saw in 2024. Like I said before, I encourage you guys to drop down into the comments and at least give me like your top 5 or something, because I know most people don't see as many films as I do each year. As always, stay tuned for more videos that are coming real soon. Be sure to hit that like button as well as subscribe while you're at it. I'll catch you guys in the next one. See you later.